Joining me now is Imoni Anderson with Rise for Youth. They're now doing a Youth in Action series with Brave New Films. We want to talk all about it. Imoni, welcome to the program.
Hi.
Hey, so for people that don't know Imoni, can you tell us what Rise for Youth is?
So Rise for Youth is a nonpartisan nonprofit campaign. We're centered around juvenile justice juvenile justice reform. And Rise for Youth stands for Reinvest in Supportive Environments for Youth. We advocate for the closure of juvenile prisons and to reinvest those same funds from the closure into community alternatives.
Yeah, that sounds wildly unrealistic. Have you guys ever done that before, though?
Well, we were instrumental in the closure of one of the largest juvenile prisons in Virginia, Beaumont Correctional Center, and we also were able to help stop the building of another juvenile prison in Chesapeake, Virginia.
So obviously I'm kidding because I know you guys did it twice in essence, but I am curious though. So they say, well, we got to build those prisons because we've got more inmates coming in. So what happens when the prisons are not built? What happens to the folks in that system?
Well, hopefully through Rise's model, the community alternatives that they could actually be rehabilitated and supportive so that we have law-abiding citizens and they aren't reoffending, so they're not going back into prison and we won't need as many facilities.
Imoni, I want to get to this series in a second, but there's a lot of issues that I care about, right? But this one, I always feel like we've gotten much worse on, and I kind of want to, you're the expert, so I wanted to check with you on this. When I was a kid, we used to get in trouble all the time, and we'd fight all the time, and nobody ever went to prison. And I lived in a pretty nice suburb of New York. Was it that the times have changed and we've gotten more punitive to young people? Is it the community? Is it a combination of both? Give me a reality check here on where we stand on this.
I think it is a combination of both, and also now we're dealing with the school to prison pipeline and a lot of city schools where kids are, if you fight in school, you are referred to the court system. So then now you're in the juvenile justice system versus it being taken care of at school.
Yeah, I mean, back when I was growing up, you had to almost murder someone to go to the court system because we were kids. We got into fights all the time. People would even pull knives and they wouldn't get referred to the court system. Maybe they should have, but they certainly didn't. But then all those people wound up being generally productive members of society and not packed off into prisons where things get worse and worse and worse and their lives are ruined. So, I mean, if I lived in that kind of community today, I would almost certainly have been sent to prison. So it's not fair to these kids, they're kids. Now, you guys did a series with Brave New Films, which is, as always, awesome. Youth in Action. I want to show folks a little trailer of that and then come back and talk about it.
Rise for Youth is a nonpartisan coalition that advocates for the closure of youth prisons.
It stands for Reinvesting in Supportive Environments for Youth.
We speak for the kids who can't speak.
The youth that are in these youth prisons are typically Black, and they're brown, and they're young, come from broken families.
We need to do something.
And as always with Brave New Films, they do encourage you to do something about it, and that's exactly what Imoni and Rise for Youth is doing. So it mentioned that it's nonpartisan. In a shocking turn of events, it appears that the Republicans have begun to come around on this criminal justice reform issue. So have some Republicans been helpful in different parts of the country on this issue?
I can speak to someone that we partner with in Virginia specifically. They are on board with it, and we were actually supposed to have a lobby day with them a couple days ago, but it got canceled due to weather. But we do have some Republicans on our side.
Okay, that's good because it's important to be able to get the legislation that we need. We need to be able to persuade folks and reach across the aisle if it works. It normally doesn't, but in this case it is, so fantastic. Are there youth in the organization trying to help youth?
Trying to help youth?
No, I'm just
sorry.
saying you guys are helping youth overall, but do you also have young people that work there?
Absolutely. We have Youth for Rise, which is a group of young advocates, and anything that the adults do, the youth are right there by their sides.
Okay, and how important do you think that is to your mission?
It's very important because we're a juvenile justice reform organization, and the youth are going to be directly impacted by the decisions that are made out of it. So they need to have a say in what's going to happen.
You know, I remember when the Parkland students came out, and obviously they had a huge impact. And I remember some politicians saying, you know, they should sit down now and let the adults, legislate. What's your take on that?
I don't agree with that because the youth can bring something unique to the table, and that's the in the now experience. We are living the brokenness of this system, and if you want to change the system, then you need to ask those that are impacted by the system.
Yeah, and the adults have not been doing a great job so far. So I welcome any kind of change. And so speaking of which, I think people might not recognize how important young people were to different movements in this country. So do you have some examples of that?
Specifically within Rise?
No, I'm saying overall in American history, because a lot of politicians are dismissive of the young and whether they can actually make a difference and have an impact.
I can't think of anything specifically, but I do remember seeing a little girl on magazine covers that had shaved her head from the school shootings, and I know she was very influential in that.
Right, and of course there's, off the top of my head, there's the civil rights movement, and people might not know the sitting in the diners that were segregated was not Martin Luther King's idea. It was not the NAACP's idea or any of the adult leadership. It was 4 young college students in North Carolina who talked themselves up into having enough courage to sit at a whites only counter at a diner, and the Klan gathered outside in the dark of night to wait for them. Hot coffee was thrown on them, and they suffered great indignities, but they made a giant difference. And so young people in this country have made a difference for a long time, and I think that that's been covered up a little bit because the current politicians don't want the young to have an influence. And so I think that's the dynamic at play and what you guys are trying to counter. So in your ideal world, Imoni, what do we do in rolling back the over-criminalization of the youth? Is it just closing down the prisons, or is there some fundamental fix we could do to the system so we can go back to my probably non-existent idyllic world that I grew up, that I thought applied to everyone, but I clearly didn't?
Well, I think we need some racial bias training, along with closing down the juvenile prisons. If somewhere is needed for the youth to be rehabilitated that's not able to be in their community or in their home, then there has to be a secure care facility, but it needs to be supportive of the youth and of the community. Okay,
so folks can obviously check out the series at bravenewfilms.org. In fact, it's bravenewfilms.org/youth in action, and we'll have the link down below if you're watching this later on YouTube or Facebook. They can go to riseforyouth.org to find out more. Imoni, anything else they can do to get involved?
On our Rise for Youth website, they could sign up for our mailing list. They could also follow us on Instagram. It's Rise4Youth. They can follow us on Twitter at Rise for Youth, and they can like us on Facebook at Rise for Youth.
All right, Imoni Anderson, Rise for Youth. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.